Have you ever felt that your prayer is so close to being answered, yet something invisible seems to hold it back? You've prayed, waited, hoped, and still silence. It's almost as if your soul stands before a locked door, and you can hear God moving on the other side, but the key just won't turn. Saint Teresa of Ávila, one of the greatest mystics in history, knew this feeling deeply. She understood that between heaven and our hearts, there are often unseen obstacles, quiet, subtle traps that keep grace from flowing freely. These traps don't look like evil. They often hide behind good intentions, behind words like devotion, effort, or even holiness. And that's what makes them so dangerous. Teresa wrote that the soul is like a great castle made of diamond or crystal, filled with rooms of light. But many people never step beyond the outer walls. Why? Because they're caught in spiritual patterns that look like faith but are really fear. They pray with lips, but their hearts are still chained by impatience, pride, guilt, distraction, or resistance. She called these inner blockages the impediments of grace. If you've ever wondered why miracles seem delayed, why peace feels close but slips away, you're not alone. Saint Teresa believed that before a miracle arrives, the soul must become spacious enough to receive it. The blessing is not denied. It's simply waiting for the space to open. And here's the secret she revealed to her Carmelite sisters. Sometimes we don't need more prayer. We need clearer prayer. Prayer purified from the 7 invisible traps that choke its power. In the next moments, I'll walk you through these 7 traps one by one, exactly as the mystic from Ávila described them, and I'll share the small living practices she used to dissolve each one. They are simple, but they carry centuries of divine wisdom. So, if your heart has been waiting for a breakthrough, if your soul longs to feel that your prayers truly reach God, stay with me until the end. Because by the time we finish, you'll understand how to remove the hidden barriers that stand between you and your miracle. If you desire that transformation, write in the comments, Saint Teresa, open my path to grace. It will be your first conscious act of faith, and the beginning of a journey that could change not only how you pray but how you live. Saint Teresa always began her teachings not with fear but with hope. She believed that God never hides himself out of cruelty, only to draw us closer, to awaken in us the desire to seek him with a deeper heart. When we begin to understand this, the entire journey changes. What once felt like delay starts to feel like invitation. So before we open the 7 traps that block your miracle, I want to make you a promise. Actually, 3 promises, inspired directly by Saint Teresa's own words and experience. First, by the end of this journey, you will recognize the patterns that have quietly been keeping your prayers from bearing fruit. You'll see the traps not as accusations but as maps, signs showing where your heart needs healing. Second, you'll discover the countermoves Saint Teresa used. Short, concrete spiritual gestures that anyone can practice. No special rituals, no secret formulas. Just sincere actions that align your soul with grace again. And third, you'll receive a nightly practice. A 7-day spiritual cleansing, rooted in the wisdom of the interior castle. A small ritual you can begin tonight that reopens the channels of divine favor. Teresa wrote that the soul is like a crystal castle illuminated by the sun of God's love. When it's clear, light passes freely through it, filling every room with radiance. But when the glass is covered in dust, of fear, anxiety, pride, or guilt, the light still shines but the soul can't reflect it. Our task, she said, is not to create light but to remove the dust. In her words, the sun of divine grace never ceases to shine. The soul only needs to open the window. And that's exactly what we're going to do. In the next chapters, you'll learn to open those windows one by one, until the air of heaven flows through you again. But before we continue, take one quiet moment. Close your eyes if you can. Breathe gently and whisper the words Saint Teresa herself repeated whenever she began prayer. Let nothing disturb you. Let nothing frighten you. All things pass. God never changes. Now open your heart, because what comes next is the beginning of your transformation. Let's start with the first and most deceptive trap. The one that fools even the most devout souls. Holy hurry. Have you ever found yourself praying for something with all your heart, but secretly checking the clock of heaven? You whisper, Lord, I trust you, yet somewhere inside you wonder, why hasn't it happened yet? This is what Saint Teresa called one of the subtlest enemies of grace. Impatience disguised as zeal. She saw it often among her sisters, those who burned with devotion but could not bear to wait. They prayed intensely one day, and when nothing changed the next, their hearts grew restless. Teresa wrote, "God does not measure time as we do. He waits for the soul to be still enough to receive him." She knew that divine timing is never slow, it's perfectly timed to the soul's readiness. Holy hurry is the illusion that movement equals progress, that if we just do more prayers, more novenas, more striving, we can somehow push the gates of heaven open. But Teresa discovered the opposite. The harder we push, the tighter we close the door. Because real faith is not proven by how much we do but by how deeply we trust. She compared the impatient soul to a pond in a storm. The surface is agitated, rippling in every direction, and even though the light still shines above, it cannot reflect it clearly. But when the water is still, the sun paints its image on the surface. So it is with the heart. Only in stillness can we see God's reflection. If you've been living in holy hurry, praying but anxious for results, Teresa offers a simple, gentle practice. It's not about slowing your clock, it's about slowing your soul. Place your hand over your heart. Breathe in slowly as you say within yourself, "Jesus." Then exhale softly, "I trust you." Do this 10 times with your full attention. Let your body and mind follow your breath. Feel the pace of heaven, unhurried, steady, calm, moving through you. Afterward, whisper the words Saint Teresa taught her sisters whenever impatience would rise. "Let nothing disturb me." She believed that true patience isn't about waiting passively, it's an active form of love. When you stop demanding that God move faster, you begin to move closer to him. And something miraculous happens. What once felt like delay becomes divine preparation. What seemed like silence becomes the space where faith matures. If you feel that hurry in your soul today, remember this. Your miracle isn't lost, it's being prepared in a slower rhythm, one that love itself set in motion. In the next chapter we'll face the second trap, a far more dangerous one, because it wears the mask of holiness itself, invisible pride. There's a kind of pride that doesn't shout. It kneels. It prays. It even weeps before God. And yet, it quietly whispers, "I will be done, but please, Lord, bless it." Saint Teresa knew this spirit well. She saw it not only in others, but in herself during her early years of conversion. She called it invisible pride, the hidden belief that we can serve God while still holding the pen that writes the story. She wrote, "We often think we have surrendered when in truth we are only negotiating." Those words pierce, don't they? Because pride doesn't always look like arrogance. Sometimes it looks like control wrapped in piety. Invisible pride appears when we tell God the how and the when. "Lord, I'll follow you, but only if you fix this by next month. I'll accept your will, as long as it doesn't take me through pain." We begin to treat prayer like a contract instead of communion. Teresa warned that this form of pride blocks grace more than open sin, because it disguises itself as virtue. It tricks the soul into thinking it's surrendered while keeping one hand tightly closed. But she also offered a gentle remedy, a way to break this invisible chain. When you feel yourself struggling, arguing in prayer or trying to convince God, stop. Bow your head and whisper slowly, "Lord, I give you permission to be God." Say it again until it no longer feels like words, until it becomes truth. Then choose one small act of humility to seal it. Something hidden. Something you'd rather avoid. Apologize when it costs you pride. Offer help when no one sees it. Do that quiet task you've been postponing, not for recognition but for love. Teresa taught that humility is not about thinking less of yourself. It's about seeing yourself in truth. When you allow God to be God, you become what you were always meant to be. A soul that receives freely instead of one that wrestles for control. She once wrote, "The humble soul travels quickly. Even stumbling, it reaches God before the proud who run." Invisible pride is subtle, but when you surrender it, everything shifts. Peace returns. Miracles once delayed begin to unfold naturally. Not because you forced them, but because you finally stepped aside and let grace move. Tonight, before you sleep, try this simple prayer. "Jesus, I trust your wisdom more than my plans." It may feel small, but in the invisible world, those words thunder like victory. And now that you've loosened the grip of pride, it's time to face another hidden trap, one that often disguises itself as holiness, but quietly poisons the heart with guilt. In the next chapter we'll uncover the third obstacle that keeps so many souls from peace: scruples and self-accusation. Have you ever finished praying and immediately wondered if you prayed well enough? Have you ever confessed the same sin again and again, hoping that this time maybe you'll feel forgiven? That endless whisper of self-doubt, "I'm not worthy, I'm not pure enough, I didn't do it right," is the third trap Saint Teresa warned about. She called it the prison of scruples, and she knew it very well. Early in her spiritual life, Teresa suffered under the weight of her own conscience. She would spend hours questioning every thought, every gesture, terrified that she had offended God. But Christ himself corrected her heart. In prayer she heard within her soul, "My mercy is not measured by your anxiety but by my love." From that moment she began to teach that excessive guilt is not humility. It is disguised pride, because it keeps the soul looking at itself instead of looking at God. She wrote, "There is no greater deception of the devil than to make a soul believe it offends God by trusting in his mercy." Think about that. The enemy doesn't always tempt us with sin. Sometimes he tempts us with shame. Saint Teresa compared the scrupulous soul to a bird whose wings are tied by its own fear. It longs to fly toward heaven, but every time it tries, it looks down and doubts its strength. The wings are fine. The heart simply refuses to use them. If you've been living in that inner storm of guilt, Teresa's counsel is tender and direct. First, when the voice of accusation rises, do not debate with it. Simply say, "Jesus, have mercy on me, a sinner, beloved." Notice that last word, beloved, changes everything. Mercy isn't a courtroom, it's a reunion. Second, make your examination of conscience short and sincere. Ask yourself, where did I resist love today? Name it once, ask forgiveness once, and let it go. Then pray one Our Father slowly. When you reach the words, "Forgive us our trespasses," pause. Imagine his hands on your shoulders, gentle, unhurried. Feel the forgiveness that already exists before you even finish the prayer. Finally, thank him. Say, "You are greater than my failures." Teresa insisted that peace after confession or prayer is not a sign of pride, it's a sign of trust. She wrote, "When the soul accepts mercy, it glorifies God far more than when it weeps without hope." If you still feel unworthy, remember this. The moment you ask sincerely, heaven forgets your sin. You are the only one still remembering. To cling to guilt is to clutch ashes when God is offering light. Tonight, let this truth settle over you like quiet rain. You are forgiven, you are loved, you are safe in his mercy. And with the weight of scruples lifted, your heart is ready for the next lesson, how to truly be present when you pray. Because the fourth trap isn't guilt. It's distraction, the slow drift of the soul that prays with words but not with attention. Have you ever begun your prayer full of good intentions, only to find your mind wandering after a few seconds? You start the rosary, but suddenly you're thinking about your schedule, a message you forgot to send, or something that happened years ago. You say, "Lord, I'm here," but half of you is everywhere else. Saint Teresa called this state the scattering of the soul. She saw that distraction isn't just a modern problem, it's a spiritual wound that has always followed humanity. She wrote, "Our thoughts are like little birds that will not rest. They dart from branch to branch even when we are at prayer." But then she added something beautiful. God does not expect the bird to stop flying immediately. He only asks that it return to his hand when it notices it has strayed. What a relief that is. Teresa teaches that the problem is not that our minds wander. The problem is that we forget to come back. Prayer is not about maintaining perfect focus. It's about repeatedly returning with love. She once told her sisters, "Even when I cannot fix my thoughts, I know he is looking at me." That is enough. For her, the heart of mental prayer was simple. A loving attention to the one who dwells within. The purpose of silence, she said, is not emptiness, it's presence. So how do we return to that presence when distraction takes over? Teresa left us a gentle exercise, a doorway into stillness. Before you begin to pray, sit quietly for a moment. Place your hand over your heart and whisper softly, "You are here." Say it 5 times slowly. Feel those words sink deeper with each breath. Then choose a single phrase, one short line that your soul can hold. It could be, "Jesus, I love you," or "Lord, I am yours." Stay with that one phrase for a few minutes. When your mind wanders, and it will, don't scold yourself. Simply notice it and return to the phrase, the way a child reaches again for its mother's hand after getting distracted. In time, something will change. Your words will grow fewer, but your awareness will grow deeper. And that's when true prayer begins, when your heart prays without needing to speak. Saint Teresa called this state the prayer of quiet. It's not achieved by effort but by surrender. The more gently you return, the more easily the soul finds peace. She wrote, "A small flame, if protected from the wind, will soon become a fire. So it is with attention, guard it gently and it will ignite love." Tonight when you kneel to pray, don't aim for many words. Aim for one loving gaze. Because in that gaze, even without words, your soul says everything. And now that your heart has learned stillness, it's time to face the next trap. One that quietly steals the strength of even the most sincere believer. It's not distraction anymore but something deeper. Inconsistency. Have you ever made a spiritual promise to yourself? From now on I'll pray every day, only to break it after 3 days? Have you ever felt that your devotion rises and falls like the tide? One week you're on fire for God, the next week you feel cold and distant. Saint Teresa understood this struggle better than anyone. She called it the trap of inconsistency, the quiet pattern that prevents the soul from ever taking root. She wrote, "The devil has little fear of the soul that begins many things and finishes none." Inconsistency isn't about laziness. It's about letting feelings lead the way. When we pray only when we feel inspired, our faith becomes a guest of our emotions. But Teresa knew that real love, divine love, doesn't depend on mood. It's built on holy perseverance, what she famously called determined determination. She wrote, "When we decide to be faithful even when the heart feels dry, God Himself becomes our strength." That's the secret. The moment you choose constancy, heaven supplies endurance. Teresa often compared the soul to a garden. At first, the soil is hard, the water scarce, and every weed seems stronger than the flowers. But if you water it a little each day, not perfectly, just faithfully, one morning you'll look out and see it transformed. The weeds wither, the blossoms multiply, and what once felt barren now overflows with fragrance. She said, "God never withholds Himself from the soul that perseveres." So how do we practice constancy in the rhythm of ordinary life? Teresa's method is beautifully simple. She called it the little rule. Every day, no matter how you feel, do 3 small things. First, spend at least 10 minutes in mental prayer, in silence with your heart turned toward God. Second, perform 1 act of mercy, something kind that costs you a little effort. Third, do 1 act of humility, something that softens your ego. Mark it each day on a small calendar or notebook. Draw an X for every day you complete all 3. It doesn't matter if your prayer was distracted or dry. What matters is that you showed up. Teresa told her nuns, "God walks among the pots and pans." She meant that holiness isn't in the extraordinary, it's in faithfulness to the ordinary. And when you fall, because everyone does, she said, begin again and do not tire of beginning, for God never tires of forgiving. That's the power of constancy. The miracle rarely happens in the thunder. It happens in the repetition of quiet faith. If you've been inconsistent, don't condemn yourself. Just begin again, tonight. Take the first small step. God will take 10 toward you. Because the soul that returns every day, no matter how weak, becomes unshakable. In the next chapter, we'll face one of the hardest traps to conquer. The wound that closes heaven's windows more tightly than any other, resentment. Saint Teresa called it, the lock on the heart that even prayer cannot open, until we forgive. Have you ever tried to pray for peace while secretly holding someone in your heart with bitterness? You say, "Lord bless me," but somewhere beneath the words there's a quiet resistance, but not them. That tension, that refusal to release, is what Saint Teresa called one of the most destructive traps of all. Resentment. She wrote, "The soul that clings to offense builds walls within its own castle. Those walls don't only keep others out, they also keep grace from flowing in. And that's why so many people feel their prayers bounce back in silence. It's not that God has turned away, it's that our hearts are closed from the inside." Teresa understood forgiveness not as a feeling but as a decision of love. She once told her sisters, "If you cannot yet feel compassion, then at least desire to forgive. Desire is already the beginning of grace." Forgiveness for her was not about pretending the pain never happened. It was about refusing to let pain define the soul's direction. She described resentment as a chain forged link by link. Anger, memory, pride, revenge. And then she said something deeply comforting. Every link is broken the moment you bless the one who hurt you. If you carry someone in your heart whose name makes your peace tremble, Teresa offers this practice. Simple, quiet, and powerful. Sit in silence. Picture the person before you, not as they are now but as a soul seen by God, still loved, still redeemable. Then whisper, Jesus, I release them to your justice and your mercy. Pause. Add these words, bless them as you know best. So, no speeches, no explanations. Just release. At first you may feel nothing, maybe even anger. That's okay. Forgiveness begins with the will, not the emotion. Say the prayer anyway. And if you can take one small act to seal it, pray a decade of the rosary for them, or speak kindly of them once, even if they'll never know. Teresa taught that forgiveness transforms not only the heart but the atmosphere around you. She said, a soul that forgives becomes like clear air. The Holy Spirit passes through it freely. If you've ever noticed that your home feels heavy, that peace doesn't linger, ask yourself if resentment might be the cause. Forgiveness doesn't only heal relationships. It unlocks heaven's protection over your life. And here's something extraordinary Teresa revealed to her nuns. When you bless those who hurt you, you rob the enemy of his foothold. He feeds on division, your mercy starves him. She told them, demons flee from forgiveness more than from holy water. So tonight take this step. Release the one who hurt you, not because they deserve it but because you deserve peace. You cannot drink poison and expect the other to suffer. Once you forgive, something unseen shifts. The walls of your inner castle begin to breathe again. Grace starts to flow where it couldn't before. And now, with your heart lighter and your soul unchained, we can confront the final and deepest obstacle, the one Teresa called the root of all resistance. It's not pride, not guilt, not resentment. It's fear. In the next chapter we'll uncover the seventh and final trap, the fear of surrender. Have you ever whispered, Jesus, I trust you, while secretly thinking, but please not that way? You trust him in theory, until his plan threatens your comfort, your timeline, your control. This is the last and deepest trap, the fear of surrender. Saint Teresa called it, the trembling before love. She wrote, many souls come to the door of the king's chamber, but few dare to enter, for they fear what will happen if they truly give themselves. She knew that the final barrier between the soul and its miracle is not doubt, but fear of losing control. Surrender to most people sounds like defeat, like giving up. But to Teresa, it was the highest victory. She said, when the soul no longer keeps anything for itself, God gives it everything. Think about that. The more you cling to something, an outcome, a person, an identity, the less room you leave for God's design. And yet, the moment you open your hands, the impossible becomes possible. Teresa herself lived this truth painfully. When God called her to reform the Carmelite order, she was terrified. She faced rejection, misunderstanding, exhaustion, and loneliness. But when she finally said yes, completely, grace began to move with unstoppable force. What had once been a single frightened woman became a spiritual revolution that still transforms hearts 5 centuries later. She wrote, he who possesses God lacks nothing. God alone suffices. Those words weren't poetry for her. They were battle-tested reality. So how can you begin to live this surrender in your own life? Teresa taught her sisters a gesture, simple yet profoundly symbolic. Open your hands before God. Say quietly, I give you the keys I fear to hand over. Then name them one by one. Pi health. Pi family. Pi reputation. Pi future. Whatever comes to mind, whisper it. After each one say, choose for me, Jesus. You may feel your heart tighten, that's normal. The soul resists the very thing it needs most. But stay with the prayer. Let it stretch you. Then seal it with one small act of generosity. Do something that costs you comfort. Give, forgive, or yield. Every time you give something up for love, you echo Christ's surrender. Teresa promised that fear cannot survive in a heart that acts in faith. She wrote, the will that rests in God is never afraid, for it has found its rest. When you surrender, you don't lose yourself. You find yourself. You discover that freedom is not in control but in trust. And something else happens. Miracles stop needing to be chased. They start arriving quietly, naturally, like flowers opening at dawn. If fear has held you back from giving God everything, let tonight be the night you let go. Whisper it from your heart, not my will but yours. And feel the peace that follows. Because once fear is gone, there's nothing left to block the path of grace. And that's when signs begin to appear. small luminous signs that your miracle is already on its way. In the next chapter we'll recognize those signs together, the gentle marks of a soul whose path is finally clear. When the 7 traps begin to fall away, something remarkable happens, not outside first but within. You start to sense a quiet shift, almost like the air in your soul has changed. The storm hasn't vanished yet, but the clouds have begun to thin. This is how Saint Teresa described it. When the soul makes room for grace, peace enters before the miracle. She taught her nuns to pay attention to the small signs of God's movement, not the thunder but the whisper. So, how can you know your path is clearing? There are certain unmistakable marks of grace. First, you begin to notice a lightness inside. The heaviness that once surrounded your prayer, the pressure, the anxiety starts to dissolve. You no longer feel desperate, you feel drawn. Even if your situation hasn't changed yet, your heart has. Second, your thoughts about time soften. You stop counting days and start trusting the process. Where there was once hurry, there's now patience. Not resignation but quiet confidence. You begin to understand what Teresa meant when she said, "The soul that trusts in God rests even while it waits." Third, forgiveness comes easier. Old names that used to sting lose their power. You can remember without bitterness and sometimes even with compassion. This, Teresa said, is one of the surest proofs that grace has begun to work. When love starts to replace memory, the door of heaven is already open. Fourth, prayer becomes simpler. You no longer struggle to say the right words. You just sit in silence and feel known. Even short moments of stillness bring a sense of being accompanied. Teresa called this the companionship of the King. Fifth, you notice divine coincidences. Small, perfect timings. A word spoken at the right moment. A door that opens unexpectedly. A burden that suddenly feels lighter without explanation. To Teresa, these weren't random. She said, "When love begins to reign, providence walks openly in the house." These signs don't mean your journey is over. They mean it's beginning properly. You've cleared the road and now grace can travel freely. If any of these have started to appear in your life, even one, don't dismiss it as chance. Write in the comments, "The way opens." Because every soul that testifies strengthens another who is still waiting. And here's something Saint Teresa loved to remind her daughters. God's answers often arrive quietly. When peace enters first, the miracle follows naturally. Never separate the two. You may not yet see the outcome, but you can already feel the approach of grace. And that is the surest sign of all, the stillness before blessing. Now that your heart is open and your path is clear, the question becomes, how do you keep it that way? How do you make this new clarity last beyond tonight? In the next chapter, you'll learn Saint Teresa's 7-day method, a nightly practice designed to keep your heart open and your soul aligned with grace. A simple rhythm that renews your inner peace day after day. Let's begin that sacred routine together. Saint Teresa used to say, "The soul needs small daily habits more than rare, great efforts." She knew that grace is like a delicate flame. It doesn't survive on grand emotions but on quiet constancy. And that's why she left us a simple rhythm, a gentle pattern that keeps the heart free from the traps we've uncovered. I call it the 7-day grace unblocker, inspired by her teachings. It's not a ritual. It's a conversation, a daily meeting with God at the doorway of peace. Each night focuses on one trap, offering a practice that reopens your soul before you sleep. It takes only a few minutes, but if you do it faithfully, it can transform your interior life in a week. Night 1. Holy Hurry. Before bed, place your hand over your heart. Breathe slowly, saying, "Jesus, I trust you." Write one line in a small notebook. "Where did I rush God today?" Then whisper, "Your timing is perfect." You'll fall asleep not in frustration but in trust. Night 2. Invisible Pride. Bow your head and pray, "Lord, I give you permission to be God." List one act of obedience you'll take tomorrow. Maybe forgiving someone, finishing a quiet duty, or letting someone else's opinion stand. Then rest in silence. Humility is peace. Night 3. Scruples and self-accusation. Spend 1 minute examining your day. Ask, where did I resist love? Confess it to God with a sincere, simple heart. Pray once, "Jesus, have mercy on me, beloved." Then close your notebook. No repeating. No doubting. Trust that forgiveness has already been given. Night 4. Fragmented attention. Sit on your bed. Place your hand over your heart and whisper 5 times, "You are here." Then say only one phrase for a few minutes. Jesus, I love you. Don't force focus. Just keep returning to his presence until stillness comes. Night 5. Inconsistency. Look at your calendar or notebook. Mark an X for today's prayer. Thank God for one small way you stayed faithful. Then prepare your next prayer time. Choose the moment and the place. Teresa said, "The soul that plans for prayer will not forget prayer." Night 6. Resentment and closed doors. Think of one person who has troubled your heart. See them in your mind and pray softly. Jesus, I release them to your justice and your mercy. Bless them as you know best. End by saying, I choose peace. Then fall asleep under heaven's clear air. Night 7. Fear of surrender. Open your hands. Say, I give you the keys I fear to hand over. Name them, your plans, your family, your future. Whisper, choose for me, Jesus. Then sleep with your hands relaxed and open, symbol of a heart that trusts. Repeat this cycle every week. Don't look for perfection, look for presence. Each night, grace works a little deeper, polishing the crystal walls of your soul. Saint Teresa promised, the Lord walks among the faithful habits of his friends. If you keep this small nightly rhythm, you'll begin to notice that your days feel lighter, your heart steadier, and your prayer more alive. This is how miracles find you, through quiet perseverance. And now, as our week of renewal nears its completion, let's listen to one final story. A simple testimony that shows how these teachings come to life in the hearts of ordinary people. In the next chapter, you'll hear what Teresa called the fruit of trust. How grace moves when a soul finally lets God lead. Saint Teresa loved stories, not to entertain, but to prove that divine truths live best inside ordinary hearts. She would gather her sisters in the dim candlelight of the convent and tell them how grace works in the quiet corners of life. She called these stories living mirrors of God's patience. One story she told often was about a sister who struggled with anxiety and impatience in prayer. Every evening that sister would weep, saying, "Mother, I try to trust God, but my heart runs faster than his will." Teresa smiled gently and replied, "Then let your heart run, but keep it running toward him." The sister obeyed. She stopped fighting her restlessness and simply brought it into her prayer each night. Weeks later she came back radiant. "Mother," she said, "I still feel anxious sometimes, but peace comes quicker. I think he's teaching me to wait inside his arms." Teresa answered, "Then you have learned the secret of prayer. The soul that rests in waiting already holds its miracle." Centuries later, people still write about this same transformation. A mother once shared, "I began the 7-day practice from Saint Teresa's teachings. The first thing that changed wasn't my situation, it was my sleep. I stopped waking up afraid. I felt as if someone was watching over me again." Another wrote, "I prayed the surrender prayer each night, and by the 3rd day the bitterness I carried for years was gone. I can't explain it, it just left me quietly." These are not coincidences. They are the natural results of opening the door to grace. Teresa often said, "Peace is the fragrance of trust." When the soul surrenders control, peace rises like perfume from its depths, and God draws near, drawn by the scent of a trusting heart. So, if your heart feels lighter, if forgiveness has started to take root, if you've found even a moment of peace where there used to be fear, that is not small. That is the beginning of sanctity. She would tell you now, as she told her daughters, do not look for the extraordinary. God hides himself in the ordinary, done with great love. And perhaps the greatest act of love you can offer tonight is this one: to stay faithful to the journey that has begun. If this message has touched your soul, take one small step to keep it alive. Share it with someone who needs peace. Leave a comment, even one word like peace or trust. That simple act might be the seed of another person's healing. And if you haven't already, I invite you to become part of this growing spiritual family here on Timeless Wisdom of Saint Teresa. Subscribe so that each week, we can walk deeper into the luminous wisdom of the mystic from Ávila. Her visions, her prayers, her holy humor, and her unshakable trust in God. Let her voice guide you when the world grows loud. Let her words remind you that heaven is nearer than you think. Because as our beloved saint said, "Let nothing disturb you, let nothing frighten you. All things pass, God never changes. Patience obtains all things. He who has God lacks nothing. God alone suffices." May those words be the seal upon your heart tonight. And may your soul, like hers, rest peacefully in the hands of the one who loves without end.